eReceipts is part of a set of emailed statements that Denari calls eCorrespondence. eCorrespondence is considered an add-on module, and there is a charge for emails sent through eCorrespondence. You can discuss the fee with our admin office. It requires that a credit card is on file in Denari, and the fees will be charged for your emails to that card on a monthly basis. The fee for sending eReceipts is still much less than the cost of sending printed statements, however. You can set up the card that you want to use by clicking on the Self-Service tab in Denari, and then click on Credit Card on File. Click the Add New button to add your card and hit Save. Fill in the billing contact information below and you're ready to go. You may already have a card on file, and if so, you won't need to do anything further here. The next step in the process is to set up an eReceipt template. It is a separate template from your printed receipt template, although it can look similar. Synergy staff will work with you to set up your template. It is important to remember that the eReceipt is an emailed receipt that the donor will receive in their email, and they may or may not choose to print it out. It is not a printed receipt that will be emailed as an attachment. Since the donor is responsible to print out the receipt, the look of the receipt will depend on their ability to print from their email program. Therefore, it's a good idea to keep the layout simple. The goal is to provide them with a tax statement and a thank you message. It will never look as good as your printed receipt when and if they choose to print it. Denari determines which donors will get printed or emailed receipts based on that donor's preference, and that can be selected by you internally, or the donor can make that selection through their online community account. So the next step is to set up the preferences for each donor. But first, you must decide what your philosophy will be toward receipts. One option is to decide that all donors with an email address will get eReceipts, whether they state that as their preference or not. Or you could decide that all donors will get printed receipts unless they tell you differently. We can set the global setting for either of those policies when setting up your template, and it can be changed later if needed. If no preference is set for a donor, Denari will default to the global setting. Let's assume now that all of your donors will get printed statements unless they tell you they want the emailed version. There are several ways to solicit their preference. One is by adding a line to their printed receipt asking them to sign up for eReceipts by checking a box and providing you with their email address. You could also send an email to all of your donors for which you already have email addresses, asking them to reply back if they want emailed receipts. There are of course a number of ways you can get that information. Once you know their preference, you're ready to set them up, and it's fairly simple. We'll go to the Donors tab, Name List Management, and we'll select a donor's record. From there we'll go to Other Pages, and then eCorrespondence Emails. If they don't already have an email address here, click on Add New to create a new one. Fill in the email field and choose a status. New simply means that this email address has never been used by Denari to send an email. Once that happens, it will change to active. And then the last thing you need to do here is hit the Make Primary button at the top of the page. That will cause this address to be the one that Denari uses for eReceipts from now on. Now click Save. Now we can set the preference by clicking the power bar icon on the right and selecting eCorrespondence Preferences. That power icon button is off of your screen, so I'm going to go through this the long way by going back to the Donors tab, Name List Management again, and selecting our donor. Then Other Pages, and now eCorrespondence Preferences. Here you'll choose the email address you want to use and the delivery method, in this case email only, and hit Save. From now on, Denari will not produce a printed statement when you run receipts. You will run eReceipts from the batch screen. So let's go to the Gifts tab, Gift Batching, and we'll select a batch. Here you see two buttons, eReceipts and Receipts. When you click the Receipts button, Denari will find those donors in the batch whose preference is set to printed only or both. If the donor has no preference set, Denari will use the global setting we mentioned earlier. It will then produce printed receipts for only those donors. When you hit the eReceipts button, Denari will produce an email for each donor with that preference. However, the emails are not immediately sent. A job is created and is awaiting your approval. The reason for the approval process is to give you a chance to review the statements before they're sent. To approve them, you'll go to the eCorrespondence tab, scroll to the bottom of the page, and here we'll find the jobs that are awaiting approval. Under the View column, you'll see a link that says View Job. You can click that link to review the receipts in that batch. Once you're satisfied that the job is ready to go, you can click anywhere in the line or in the row to open the approval form. Simply enter the approval code and click Approve Job at the top of the page. The emails are now being sent and there is no going back. They cannot be retrieved. At this point, you're probably asking, where do I get the approval code? For that, we'll go to the eCorrespondence tab, eCorrespondence Control Record. In the Authorized Code field, you'll find the link to change that code. When we click that, we can enter the new password or code and click the Change Password button. While we're here, you'll notice some other fields. For example, there is the default eReceipt gift letter. Select a letter here that will serve as your default. Denari uses the exact same process for letters as it does with printed receipts. It will use the letter body that you've selected in the gift record for this donation in the emailed receipt. If no letter is found in the gift record, the default letter will be used. There are two fields in the next section. The first is From User, and this is what Denari will use in the From section of the email. It will help your donors quickly recognize that the email is not spam and is from you. The second field, Reply to Email, is the email address that will be used should the donor hit the reply button from the email. And then finally on this page is the inactive bounce count. Bounces are emails that can be delivered for a variety, can't be delivered for a variety of reasons. Some internet service providers and spam filters identify emails from the same address as spam when they're bounced several times, and that sender is then blacklisted. They will allow no other email from that sender forever. So you can put a limit on the number of bounces that can take place before Denari marks that email address as inactive so that no further attempts can be made. Usually a 1 or a 2 is a good number here. So how do we know when email has bounced and who are the donors? Let's click on the eCorrespondence tab again, and now we'll choose Smart Email Dashboard. Here you see a list of jobs that are awaiting approval in the upper left box. You can run them from here just as you did the eCorrespondence page. It does the same thing. Below that, you'll find the Recent Jobs box. This will list jobs that have been recently sent. Notice the columns Sent On, Sent, Bounces, and Resend Bounces. When there's a job listed there, you'll find a number in that field that shows how many bounces there were from that job. We can click on the link to that job to see a report showing other information from the job. Click on the number in the bounce field to see a report showing the donors and the email addresses for those receipts that have bounced. You can now take steps to correct the problem or change their preference to printed only so that they continue to get receipts. Of course, you can click on the numbers in the other fields for information related to those fields as well. Back in the Smart Email Dashboard, you also have a Send link that appears when there are bounces for that job. Clicking that will resend that receipt. Of course, depending on the original problem that caused it to bounce, it may bounce again. Finally, you also have the ability to send a single receipt. You will find that link in the Gifts tab and Send Single Receipt. Simply enter the receipt number for the gift and click the Send Receipt button at the top of the page. That will create a new job that will be awaiting your approval. If you don't know the receipt number, you can go to the donor's gift history page to get that information. This concludes this video on eReceipts. If you have any questions, please contact tech support through the support button at the top of the Denari page.